You open your banking app. You look at the number. You feel a small, cold drop in your stomach. A meat pie used to cost you $2. Now it costs $7. Rent on a share house used to be a joke between friends. Now it is the main topic of every dinner conversation you have. You tell yourself life has gotten harder. You tell yourself money doesn't go as far as it used to. But the real answer is far stranger. Your brain is not built to measure money. It is built to measure change. And that single glitch in how you think is quietly rewriting your entire sense of what a good life is supposed to feel like. Think about the last time you complained about a price. You didn't compare it to your income. You compared it to a memory. The $2 pie, the $5 tank of petrol, the share house that cost you $80 a week and somehow included bills. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky spent decades studying exactly this pattern. They found that people don't judge value in absolute terms. People judge value against a reference point, a starting line planted somewhere in the past. For you, that starting line might be 2005, or it might be the first time you moved out of home. It doesn't matter when it was set. What matters is that once it's set, everything after it feels like a loss. Here is where it gets strange. Wages have gone up since then. In raw numbers, most people in Australia earn more today than they did 15 years ago. So why does it feel like less? Because your brain isn't comparing your wage to 2005's wage. It's comparing today's prices to 2005's prices using a mental exchange rate that never updates. Economists have a name for this too. It's called anchoring. Once a number gets stuck in your head, every future number gets measured against it, even long after that number stopped making sense. Your grandfather bought a house on one income. You know this. Everyone knows this. It gets repeated at every family barbecue like a piece of scripture. But here's what almost never gets said next to it. Interest rates in the 1980s sometimes reached 17%. Houses were smaller. Many had one bathroom, no air conditioning, and were built 40 minutes from anywhere. The comparison feels true because the feeling is real. The nostalgia is real. But the math underneath it is far messier than the story we tell. Why does the story survive anyway? Because nostalgia isn't really about facts. It's about function. Researcher Konstantin Sedekides, who has spent much of his career studying the psychology of nostalgia, found that longing for the past does something useful for the mind. It gives you comfort during uncertain times. It reminds you that you belong to something bigger than the present moment. Nostalgia isn't lying to you for no reason. It's protecting you. It's handing you a warm memory precisely when the present feels cold and unpredictable. That's why the milk bar on the corner still feels more real to you than the servo that replaced it. That's why the sound of a screen door still hits you harder than any modern doorbell ever could. Your brain isn't just remembering the past, it's curating it. It keeps the sunny afternoons. It quietly drops the school shoes that pinched, the summers without air conditioning, the long, boring Sundays with nothing open and nowhere to go. Which brings us to something economists have puzzled over for 50 years. It's called the Easterlin Paradox, named after economist Richard Easterlin. He noticed something odd. As countries get richer, people don't necessarily get happier. Income rises. Satisfaction barely moves. Why? Because happiness isn't measured against poverty. It's measured against your neighbors, against your own past, against the life you thought you'd have by now. This is where everyday economics quietly turns into psychology. You are not comparing your life to 1975. You are comparing it to an idealized, half-remembered version of 1995, filtered through childhood, filtered through comfort, filtered through everything your mind chose to keep. Consider petrol. $1.20 a liter feels like the real price to you if you grew up in the early 2000s. $2 feels outrageous. But adjust that $1.20 for inflation, and it's barely different from what you're paying today. Your gut doesn't do that adjustment. Your gut just remembers the number. Consider the humble takeaway coffee. Once, a coffee was something you had occasionally, a small treat bought with actual coins from your pocket. Now it might be a daily ritual, tapped and forgotten in seconds. The price has gone up, but so has the frequency. You are, in a strange way, comparing an occasional luxury from your memory to a daily habit in your present. None of this means prices haven't genuinely risen faster than wages in some areas. Housing is the clearest example, and no reframing changes that reality. But it does mean something quieter and more interesting is happening underneath the outrage. You are not just angry about numbers. You are grieving a version of normal that no longer exists, and using economics as the language to describe that grief. That's why then versus now photos go viral. That's why old servo signs, out-of-date menus, and dusty milk bar price boards get shared thousands of times online. It isn't really about the prices, it's about proof. Proof that a simpler version of your own life once existed and that you can still reach it, if only through a photograph. So next time you feel that familiar sting, checking a receipt, scrolling past an old photo of a $2 pie, pause for a second. Ask yourself what you're really comparing: the price or the memory, the economy or the version of yourself who once stood in that milk bar, coins in hand, with absolutely no idea how expensive nostalgia itself was about to become. You open your banking app again. You look at the number. This time, you notice something different. It isn't the price making your stomach drop. It's the memory standing right behind it.